I want to do a little bit today beyond go through the course requirements. I want to give you something that will make up about 20 points on every test. It's not the same one. Sorry. The timeline. I'm going to give you a list of dates and events, and every test, this will be on there. All right. You just have to regurgitate it back to me. But these will be the only dates. Okay. The other option is to make you just kind of guess and flounder around about which dates I'm going to ask. I pick out here intentionally dates, at least from my perspective, that give us the kind of the skeleton structure of the important events. So that if somebody says to you, like Dale Johnson, he was in first grade or born in 51? Was he born in 51? First grade in 51, I think. Hopefully you can think, oh, I know what was going on in America at that point. All right, can anybody know what's going on in America? Korean War? I didn't actually make it on our timeline, but that was going on.
When was the
1951. Dale Johnson was in first grade. What had concluded several years prior?
World War II?
World War II. What other kind of broader conflict we're in the middle of that the Korean War fits into?
Cold War.
Cold War. Okay, so anyway, I try to pick dates so that you can have that big structure there. So I don't know that these are perfect, but that's the intent of this. Partly so that you don't have to just scour your notes and figure out which of the hundreds of dates I'm going to ask. That would be fun. Just put a section on the test. Tell me why these dates are important. And just we won't do that. So anyway, so it's partly to help you, and it's also I think if you learn this timeline, you'll have the big structure, and you'll be able to hang things. It's at least it helps us remember things if we know where to put them. If you have a closet with no hangers and just throw everything in a pile, it's hard to find anything. But if you have hangers and put them up, it's much easier to get to them. So this is that bar to hang our information on as we go through the semester. If none of that means anything to you, it's 20% of every test. So just memorize it. All right. Ooh, we do have some chalk. 1876. Any suggestions?
Was that what President Grant was?
No.
1876.
The 100-year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence? That's not it. You might not know this year, but this is the end of Reconstruction. End of Reconstruction. Following the Civil War, the South was occupied by the Northern Army, and that ends here. Okay, so for that whole time frame, we have the South occupied and a very awkward struggle of trying to get things back on an even keel. That finally ends in 76. This will be the first thing we talk about, this Reconstruction time frame. All right, 1890.
Spanish American War?
No, that's a good guess. 8 years later. I don't know that I would have known this, but
Hawaii?
no. This is the end of the Indian Wars. All right. So next time you're reading a Louisville War and it's 1895 and they're talking about this massive uprising amongst the Sioux Indians wiping out settlers in the West, hopefully think, wait a second, that's 5 years too late. 1890 was the last of those Indian Wars. Not that there weren't problems with the Indians, but the last of them. It's actually a very sad end. A group of Indians, it's called the ghost dance. They had this. They thought if they did this particular dance, all the buffalo would come back to life and all the white people would disappear. Sounds racist. Anyway, it ended up they just got killed. It was, they're whipping up into this frenzy. Very, very sad end. But that's the end of the Indian Wars, 1890. All right. Don't answer. Don't answer. This one was already given. Spanish-American War. A splendid little war, so it was described by the Secretary of State. 1898. A 20-year time frame it would be a tough decision whether Obama's presidency has done more damage or this time frame has done more damage. This is the time frame that massive damage was done to the structure of our government. Hillary Clinton describes herself, it's called the progressive era, and she just recently said, I'm not a socialist, I'm a progressive, hearkening back to the changes that came about in this progressive era. We'll talk about them, but there's a wave, income tax, direct election of senators, and the worst one, any of you guys, man suffrage. Usually it's called women's suffrage, but I don't think that's a correct term. Women's voting, it's called women's suffrage, but it's the men that have suffered. So I think man suffrage is a more accurate term. That's it. We'll talk about that in another class period. All right, so progressive era. Very, very massive damage done to the whole structure of our constitutional structure. We'll talk about it. Now, there's some, Theodore Roosevelt fits into this progressive era. There's some people that I don't necessarily hate, but there's a philosophy underlying it and some changes that come about in the second half of this that do great damage. Great damage. All right, kind of stuck in the middle of that. Somebody else? Joseph? World War I. (1917). Anybody on this side of the class? Okay. Matthew? Okay, American involvement. America gets involved. We join into World War I. Let's do one more. 1929. From the silent quarter.
Great Depression.
Great Depression. Yes. Great Depression starts. Start of the Great Depression. The stock market crash. And another failure of government intervention into the economy. The Great Depression. 1933. I'll still give you guys preference. You're all willing to let Michael answer for you?
Prohibition.
No, that was prior. That's a good guess.
New Deal.
The New Deal, yes. The New Deal, socialism. I mean, we have a Great Depression started because of mild government involvement into the economy, and the solution is let's dive into massive government involvement into the economy. I mean, literally, you smash your finger with a 12-ounce hammer. So the solution to make it feel better is you get your friend to hit it with a sledgehammer, and it's more of the same. All right, a really very, very foolish thing. It did not draw us out of the Great Depression. It prolonged it. It made it more painful. Prior to that, there were signs of recovery, even with the meddling that was done to create the thing. It was recovering, and the Great Depression slammed us back into it. So, Obama's stimulus package and all of his ways to get us out of the current recession harken back to those ideas. This is maybe a little more stupid, but same vein.
Was Hoover president at this time?
This was FDR. Hoover was president up until 2032. FDR comes in 33 and immediately blasts us with this.
I remember FDR blamed the depression on Hoover.
Yeah, that's not a fair assessment. He called Hoover the greatest spending president in American history or something like that. He had criticized him for spending too much money, and then he doubles down on it.
Sounds like a ball.
Yeah. I mean, Hoover was not perfect. He had a very, very mixed response to it. But this is just straight socialism from the national level, direct control from the national level. So we'll talk about it in greater detail. All right, I think we better go to make these two rows now the silent quarter. Michael's rescued you guys. Yes, World War II. This was the easy one, I hope. You guys want to press your luck? December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, yes. Pearl Harbor, the surprise attack. Anybody ever read or heard much about people that claim that FDR knew about this beforehand and let it happen? Conspiracy nuts they're just that, they're nuts, okay? What they do typically is they will look at the thousands of reports that every radio operator under the Pacific wrote, and they'll cherry pick one out of the thousands and say, look, this guy said they were going to attack. They don't look at the 400 other ones that say he wasn't going to. They'll pick that one out and say, he knew right here, this is the proof. All right. Anyway, not a fair criticism. I don't like FDR at all, but this was a surprise attack. December the 7th. All right. 45 to 89. Now we're getting up to Dr. Johnson. He was born in 51, 6 years into it. He's born in 45. Could have been 6. So maybe they were celebrating this event. We already mentioned it earlier.
Prohibition.
No. That was mentioned earlier too, but that's the wrong thing. Cold War. That's what we're fighting right now. This is a conflict between freedom, led by America, and communism, led by the Soviet Union. Ends in 89. Reagan is the person responsible for bringing down the Soviet Union. That's why we're going to look at a film about him, and we spend some time about him. It's extremely aggravating to hear people bend over backwards to give credit to everybody but Reagan. Right? Even our American history textbook here talks about some phrase to the effect of even the Soviet Union didn't collapse until after he was out of office, indicating that his policies weren't especially effective. It is after he leaves office, but it'd be like me going up onto the roof and throwing an egg off, and you saying, "Oh, look, you didn't cause the egg to break. It cracked after it left your hand." He put things in motion that drove the Soviet Union over the edge. He brought it to an end. We will talk about him. Cold War. All right, next here inside this time frame, there's a couple of things we need to look at. 65 to 67. I skipped over 1962, which maybe should be a national holiday. It was JFK's assassination, but we won't do that. Mr. Schrock was just in Dallas and went through the plaza where he was assassinated and went through the whole thing. He was all excited about it, but we'll skip that. 65 to 67, anybody know? This one you might not pick out. Stephanie's willing to answer? No. That's a good guess.
Would that be Lyndon B. Johnson's name of it? What was it?
Oh, his War on Poverty, or
Yeah.
no, but that's a good guess. So, for this time frame, I have it: the civil rights movement becomes radical. Right, the civil rights movement really gets started about 1950, and in 65, 67, 66, 67, that's the time where we have riots and campuses being destroyed, cities being destroyed. Civil rights movement becomes radical. We'll talk about that in greater detail, but really what happened is there was a group of people, a lot of it funded from outside of our country, communist agitators and whatnot, who saw the civil rights movement as a way to completely change America. So they started instigating these violent protests and just all kinds of very ugly things that happens, and a lot of it was not spontaneous. It was led by these outside groups. But those are the years that it gets especially ugly. 1980. I know you're thinking, wait, we skipped over Mr. Reinhardt's birthday. That is an important date in American history, but it didn't make it on the timeline. Maybe someday in the future. I have to do some more famous things. Two people know. Are you all trying to figure out when I was born, or are you trying to figure out what happened in 1980? That's a pretty big gap. 1980. I was in elementary school. I remember it happening. Remember my parents talking about it.
Rights.
No, but that's actually a very good guess, but that's it's an election. Somebody is elected as president who causes the collapse of the Soviet Union 9 years later. Reagan? Reagan is elected. If you just want to put Reagan, it'd be fine. Reagan, I have in my outline here, you don't have to put it. The Reagan Revolution. This is when he wins, it's a radical change of everything. The way the whole executive branch thought and acted is a complete change. Yes?
Is there a reason why you skipped the Iranian hostage crisis?
Well, that took place in '79. I just didn't think it was one of those events that gives us the structure. Not that it's not important. What was I saying? I like to describe the Reagan Revolution as being in a very hot, stuffy room, which is appropriate for today, and somebody opening up the windows and letting fresh air blow in all of a sudden. All right. That's what Reagan was. We had just finished off, you mentioned the Iranian hostage situation. Carter as president. He's a nice man. Maybe should have just been grandpa, but a complete bumbling idiot as far as president. He still is alive, and people will go and interview him and ask him about what's happening in world events. I mean, this horrible presidency. I used to think it was a close run about who was the worst president in modern time, Carter or Obama. I think I pretty much would have settled on Obama at this point, but they were a very, very horrible president. And so we come out of that and the civil rights mess and just a very ugly 60s and 70s, and we get Reagan. a fresh breath air, this Reagan revolution. So very, very, very important. We will talk about it. All right, 1998. Now we should be getting up someplace close to your lifetime. Anybody alive in 98? Okay. Oh. How many became alive in 98 or were born in 98? 97? Okay. Wow. So I'm sure you were watching the news by this point. Anybody born after 98? There's young children in the room. Ah, so old, wise, and experienced people here.
Desert Storm?
No.
Desert
That's a
Shield?
good, no. The Clinton impeachment. Clinton's impeachment. There's often confusion about what the word impeachment means. All it means is he was accused. The way the system works is the House of Representatives, which at this point was controlled by Republicans, they brought these charges against him. And the Senate, which holds the trial and was run by the Democrats, found him innocent. So he was not charged. Yeah, the man was disbarred. He was not. His law license was stripped away because of this stuff. But the Democrats in the Senate decided that he should still be president. The man literally should be in jail for rape. That's where he should be, if not multiple murders. All right. But the Senate found him innocent. All right, it's the Clinton impeachment. Unfortunately, I was old enough to be aware of what was happening. I graduated from college in '95, so I remember driving someplace here in the area and listening to the report on the radio of them giving the tallies. There was 3 different charges, and they were reading off the tallies as innocent in all 3 charges. Anyway, sad day. Last one. 2001.
September 11th?
Yes. September the 11th. I think I want a breath of warm air. Forget that. I want that hot, stuffy room for a little bit. Wow. All right. I really wanted to get through that today. Any questions about the timeline? We won't drag this out. Years ago, when we were putting on the shell of this building, we didn't have heat for a while, and I used to wear my overcoat and gloves teaching, but hopefully I won't get that desperate. That was a cold winter. So, all right, next class period, we will pick up with the reconstruction of our country following the Civil War. There's two sides of it. One is the political side. We got to get these states functioning again as states. And then the other side that was much more complicated was the social side. We have all the slaves that are now free, and how do they begin to function and act in society, and we have to integrate. There's a very, very complicated mess there that had to be looked at. So we'll do that next time. You're dismissed.